transport beyond your normal, what would be your normal territory. So you also have to have appropriate written policy. And Joe, tell me if, it's different, but you have to have appropriate written policy to back up your actions.
So the two outs so far are online medical control and patient request. Right? So there should be documentation on the agency side that one of those exists. If the patient doesn't meet sort of one of the big three, STEMI, stroke, trauma. So I think a letter out to the agencies just to remind everybody about that would be indicated. Any other comments, questions?
Just the other exception that we brought up a couple months ago was in regards to St. Mary's and the stroke policy.
Want to embellish on that?
We have the capability, St. Mary's has the capability to provide neurological consults and administer TPA. One of the issues that the protocol says is that we go to a stroke center if we can make it there within 2 hours of the onset. We have had documented cases where we could have had TPA on board a patient with a stroke if they had qualified, 30 minutes quicker by bringing them to our local hospital that provides a service. The problem is the state doesn't recognize spoke hospitals because they can't guarantee or monitor the quality of care between the spoke and a hub, if you will.
Right.
So they have no anticipation of ever designating spoke hospitals, only these stroke centers. So we have it set up that St. Mary's actually has a stroke alert that we would call. We bring those stroke patients there. They have everything in place on our arrival and make that determination on whether or not that patient needs TPA, whatever the case may be.
You still need medical control for that, the way we have it set up. You say you're within 2 hours. Do I go to St. Mary's or do I go to Ellis?
Right. I mean, it's kind of the issue is always with this is you call one hospital and say, hey, this is what I have. Can I go here? Can I go there? And they say, no, go to Ellis. Hospitals are leery about sending their patients away. So they're always going to say, I mean, we're just wasting the phone call, quite honestly, because every time I call St. Mary's Hospital, no matter what it is, you think they're going to tell me to go to Ellis unless it's a STEMI, or they're going to say, nope, bring the patient here. We're going to stabilize them here. We'll make the determination on whether or not they need transferred.
Well, the protocol, I mean, this is the point about adhering to protocol, right? So your defense is your protocols, right? Like by extension from this region. The issue of spokes and hubs is, it was sort of a great idea out of the gate, but to utilize it, it's not unique to St. Mary's. There are other hospitals that have actually brought the issue to the Department of Health and said, what about a spoke that's ready to go and is linked in with a hub and whatever. And some of them had for a while. Many of the facilities actually had telemedicine connections and all that, which was expensive. The state's position is that those spokes can be stroke centers. And the state's position is that we would love to have every hospital be a stroke center. Just apply. And then when you ask the hubs, I mean the spokes about that, they see the process as too onerous. So they're saying, let Ellis do that. So that's where we sit right now. The state enabled the spoke hub model, but then it didn't really empower it protocol-wise.
So for clarification purposes, I have a stroke patient that I can make it to St. Mary's Hospital with, or Ellis within the protocol. Where do I go? Currently, the way the REMAC has stated is we call medical control and ask the physician there. The physician there every single time is going to tell us, bring the patient to St. Mary's Hospital, call a stroke alert, and we'll take it from there. That is still acceptable? Unacceptable?
Well, it's I would say in the landscape of the protocols, it's acceptable. I mean, we said that you can go to a local hospital if you get so directed by an opposite, by local medical control. At that point, the online medical control physician is sort of taking responsibility for that.
I just have a question. What about the consumer themselves? They're very educated on stroke centers. You know, if they wanted to go to a spoke or to a stroke center and you took them to a spoke instead, you know, do they have a right to know, you know, where they're going and why they're going to which center for what type of care they're getting? I mean, do you have to identify that when you're talking to the patient?
I mean, when you look at the number of stroke patients, for instance, in this particular case, that actually received TPA, it is minimal. I mean, it is very, very, very small. Whether it's at Ellis, whether it's at St. Mary's, whether it's at Bassett, it doesn't matter. You know, I guess contrary to that is, I don't necessarily know if you can receive the same treatment or you're going to receive the same treatment. And you're at a local hospital. I think if you travel outside that area, in the opposite, if you go to Ellis with a patient that can certainly be treated at St. Mary's and something goes bad, you know, we bypass the hospital that could provide the treatment. I think
I understand
that
on
we're
the
liable.
EMS side of the fence. I'm talking on the consumer side of the fence. Do we tell the patient that we're taking them to St. Mary's, which is not a stroke center, and they're having a stroke, and they had a choice for Ellis? Is that something that we need to identify to the patient?
I don't think it's our position as EMS providers to sell any particular hospital. I mean, you have to do what's right for the patient. That is the bottom line. Is if a patient's having a heart attack, you need to bring them to a STEMI center. And if you tell them, listen, you're having a heart attack, this is where we think you should go. That's one thing. You know, I don't necessarily believe that we are salespeople for particular hospitals.
I'm not saying sales, I'm saying informing. There is a choice, and there is a timeline. And as you said, which one to take them to. Does the patient have any input in that type of topic? And I'm thinking, do they know? And we have consumers out there that are aware of Ellis being the stroke center and whatnot. And if they're taken to what they are anticipating to be a stroke center, is that false information to the patient? You know, that's the point that I'm looking at as the consumer side and what they know in the public. And what is our responsibility to them and to informing them what we are doing and why we are doing.
Well, if a patient tells you they want to go to Ellis, it's a patient request. If you feel that patient should go to Ellis, then that's probably where you should go. You can certainly, if you choose as an agency, offer, say, listen, they can provide this exact service at St. Mary's Hospital. You know, we feel that you can get that treatment quicker. You know, that as an agency certainly is the case. I mean, you're talking about people that are educated to what they see on TV and everything else. They're going to tell you they want to go to Ellis. If you want to try to sell another hospital as an agency or a provider, I think that that's up to you. You know, but you have a patient request at that point. Not you're not making the decision as a provider on which one you're going.
Yeah, I think, you know, these kinds of, we're having these discussions because of the discrepancy between sort of the intent of the hub and spoke networks that the state at the onset set out to establish, and then the fact that the protocols require you to drive right past the spokes after they were so enabled. So I think, let's ask the state. I mean, I think that...
I did.
No, again.
2 months ago.
I think that these networks, I can see a way where, for example, if St. Mary's is part of the Ellis Stroke Network, right? Is Ellis the hub for St. Mary's?
Well, that's where our patients would go. There's no memorandum.
But if you're a
of
spoke,
agreement
who
or
are you a
anything.
spoke of?
Technically the closest hub, which is Ellis.
But you'd never had a really sort of formal relationship with them?
No, there's nothing in
So
writing.
the networks could get tighter, in my mind, and then the hub would have some responsibility for data collection from the spokes. And much like trauma, you know, trauma care includes all the hospitals when they do trauma data, not just patients transferred to the trauma center. So,
I'm sure
you know,
Ellis would probably not want to tackle that because the amount of information they probably have to collect on their own just to remain stroke center designated is enormous.
Yeah,
So they
it's
probably
pretty
would
daunting.
not.
That's why spokes don't really want to apply
That's
for
exactly
it.
why we're not going to.
So I think, you know, since we're, you know, on the record here, I would say the DOH's position is pretty clear. If you're not a designated stroke center, you shouldn't be taking patients in. That's pretty much, that's why they established it.
But like you said, if you have a treatment available and you take a patient farther away and you've delayed their care, and now maybe even put them out of the window, who knows? You know, maybe you get them there and then they determine, oh wait, my symptoms actually started this many hours before.
I think that,
And
you
you
know,
have a bad outcome. Where
if I
do you
was in
lie?
if I was an EMT in the back of the rig with that patient, I think the best thing I could think of doing would be to call medical control at the hub, at the stroke center, and say, you know, I'm 2 hours from you, I'm an hour from St. Mary's, what do you want me to do?
They're gonna do the same
I don't
thing.
know if that,
Bring them there.
yeah, I mean, you're calling a hospital that's out of our region
But it's
for medical
it may be,
control.
it may be the nearest stroke center, right?
Can I ask a question?
I have a question.
Once you have a patient and give them all the medications, what are you going to do with them? Are you send them to Ellis or keep them?
We've done both, depending on the patient. We've kept patients at the PTA and we've transferred out patients.
Just send them out and get the whole treatment?
It is, but what if, I mean, the way the protocol says is it's 2 hours from the onset that you have to arrive at that stroke center.
Isn't the answer, are they stable or not stable? If they're not stable, then of course you go to St. But if they're stable,
But you know,
And I thought that the AHA is now increasing the timeline from 2 hours
well,
to 3
the
hours.
AHA doesn't play any part of
I
our
understand that, but a lot
protocols.
of times the guidelines come down from the AHA, and that's how most of medicine is contrived in our hospitals, is from those protocols. And I know that a lot of that information has been, you know, changing periodically.
If you can get a positive outcome in a lesser amount of time.
If you are a patient yourself.
Yeah,
take
I
it
would
from
want
the
that.
conversation you've been having. If you're a patient yourself, and you can get a treatment that could provide you a reversal of the, you know, symptoms that you're having, quicker than going a half an hour in the opposite, you know, in the other direction.
I think-
Do you want that as a patient?
But I think you can't have it both ways. You can't
You don't
have,
know if it's an embolic stroke or.
You don't know.
or
no, but it
as
can't
a
have,
patient.
I'll argue that point, because now I can tell you that St. Mary's Hospital has got 2 64-slice CT scanners, Ellis has none. What's the first thing a stroke patient needs?
They need the CT.
A good CT. And where can
hold
I get the
hold on a
best CT
second.
at a
This is
local hospital?
let's try to keep politics aside.
Yeah.
We're talking about protocols. We're talking about state designation. A hospital shouldn't be holding itself out to be a stroke center if it's not.
We're not saying we're.
No, I'm saying in just any hospital. Like the same, we're the same as them. It's like, no, you're not. In the eyes of the state, you're not. So if any hospital wants to be a stroke center, the state would welcome the application. There's no barriers to doing that, other than, you know, the rigmarole of being a stroke center. So that would be the preferred avenue. If you have a hospital that has all that capability and is ready to roll and doing it anyway, they should become a designated stroke center, and then it's your nearest go-to. I don't think you can say, you know, equivalent to, without, you know, violating protocol.
4 months ago, it was the verdict, the opinion of the REMAC, and I believe you were absent at that when Dr. Taylor was running, that you were to call online medical control, and if the hospital, for us, the online medical control is St. Mary's Hospital. But if they say you can come here, then that's what you do, because it says right in the protocol, or otherwise directed by online medical control. Because I believe Dr. Taylor said that even Latour has the ability to do TPA. So if you were in Gloversville and you called online medical control and they said, come here, that was acceptable. Are we changing that now?
Does somebody have the protocol so we can read what the DOH, this is actually
I have the
state.
protocols and I have the minutes from the REMAC meeting where that was
All
decided.
right, so enlighten us. What does the protocol say, first of all?
Protocol says that the time of onset to estimated arrival of the emergency department will be less than 2 hours. Transport to New York State designated stroke center or consult physician, your med control, to discuss appropriate destination facility.
Okay, so that's the protocol.
So
Right.
we just, we did
It
4
doesn't
months ago.
specify who you're talking to, that control.
Exactly.
All right, so I think we're done with that discussion. That's a big out.
I would like to add just one thing to that, though. We talk about informed consent. I think it's every provider's duty to inform the patient as to what you're going to do. I mean, that's basic. Anything you're going to do with a patient, you're going to inform them and inform them of any treatment or anything like that that's available to them. I know in my region in my hospital, we have somebody that's having a stroke and they're in the village, okay? They may be an hour, depending on the weather, they may be an hour to 2 hours from a designated stroke center. And if the weather's bad, you can't fly them. So you have to travel by ground. And a lot of these people, you know, they're not within that 2 hour window when you get them to a hospital, to a stroke center.
Right, so they fall outside the protocol.
Right. But I think you always make sure that you have to inform the patient and give them an option, but, you know, explain to them what their options are.
All right, so I think the protocol was pretty clear.
I think the piece that I'm not clear on, and I think there is more to a stroke center than just TPA. There are other treatments that might be available depending on the or hemorrhagic stroke, you know what I'm trying to say. And I think that I mean, the only other one I'm aware of would be like the coiling, where they actually go in and take the clots out. I would want to know as a patient that there are other treatments available beyond TPA if you go to this other hospital. You know, you're just saying, you're focusing on one possible treatment only, and you get there and there may be other possible treatments if you go to this other place. That's what's bothering me about this.
That's why we've always said that depending on what we find, we have no problem transferring the patient down. But we can at least initiate their treatment, get that CT, which is the very first thing they need, and then depending on what that CT shows, either administer the TPA and then determine whether they still need to go. We'll still send them if there's something else that can be done, but at least get that treatment on board.
I agree, but again, now you're at a 4-hour window. All right, well, we all know that Albany Meds use an emergency device for 6-hour patients.
The protocols were created for patient safety. Any hospital can give TPA in the emergency department in the state. It doesn't need to be a stroke, a center, a hub, anything. Any hospital is capable of doing it. The physician evaluates the patient, gets the CAT scan quickly. Most of the hospitals have stroke protocols when they come in and get the CAT scans quickly. So it doesn't matter what. That's why the protocol is created. They go to the better center for complete care. I mean, the protocol is pretty clear. You can call for control, but the protocols are made for the patient's benefit, and to take all this, you know, everyone's attitude out of it and just get things that are done, that are decided by a group of physicians and lay people on what to do and how to do it.
Gus. I have one more item under new business, if that's all right with you.
Okay.
It's relative to the CMAC's motion about controlled substances and ALS services that I'm pretty sure you want to participate in. I think it's going to be another heartfelt conversation here. I think I mentioned this in my State Council report at the last meeting, that the CMAC passed a motion, it was Dr. Daly's motion, that all advanced life support services, in order to continue their status as an ALS service, had to advance to providing controlled substances. And I asked the question at the CMAC, as I sit on the CMAC, did that mean that any ALS service that did not provide controlled substances after this motion passed the SEMSCO, the State Council, would that mean that they would have to revert to being a BLS service only, and not to be able to provide any other ALS modalities out of their drug box? Dr. Leinhardt and Dr. Markowitz were the two voices against this motion, but the motion did pass at CMAC. Just to bring you all up to date, at the State Council meeting, there was very heavy discussion and a vote that indicated that the motion was not going to pass, and that I, as chair of the State Council and the temporary chair of the Systems Committee, would chair a technical advisory group to look into the impacts, both operational and fiscal, financial, per a 2008 motion that the State Council passed in September of 2008. That essentially said that any motion from the CMAC that mandated a change in the level of care should be evaluated by the Systems and at least the Finance Committee for fiscal and operational impact. So that's what we're doing. I have a very large technical advisory group of about 12 people, including several former state council chairs. And we're all very interested in looking at this issue. What I need and what we have committed ourselves to, all the people on the tag, is providing information to REMACs and to the regional councils for feedback and looking for support to see if the remaining 200 services that are spread out around the state, ALS services that do not currently provide controlled substances, whether or not we can support an effort to bring as many of them as possible on board with that. We requested data from, thanks to Beth, we requested data from the Bureau about all of the ALS services in the state and whether or not they provide controlled substances. The data is pretty revealing, and I'll read you some of the numbers. Starting from, and these are all services that, let me back up a little bit. There are roughly 600 ALS services around the state. 400 of them are now providing controlled substances, approximately. So there are approximately 200 that do not, okay? And I did a rough analysis of the data, which I have here, which Mary worked very hard on verifying, and the numbers are pretty darn accurate. There may be a few discrepancies. I did a rough analysis, and I just want to share with you the numbers because I think you might find it a little bit startling in some cases. And I'm going to start at the top with, this is, what I'm going to read to you is the percentage of services in a region that currently do not provide controlled substances, okay? The biggest loser is Nassau County at 82%. That's pretty startling.
So 82% of Nassau County ALS does not carry.
Does not.
And yet they have some mechanism to get those agents out to those patients.
Well, the argument that I'm hearing is, and unfortunately, we don't have somebody from Nassau on this technical advisory group, and I'm working on trying to fix that. I'm going to talk to Dr. Kugler down there and then see if there's somebody that could participate. Because I don't really know why. What I'm told is, apparently there is a part-time executive director, but I'm told, and I need to confirm this with Mary or Joe, I'm told they don't have a program agency in Nassau County?
Nassau County, since Irene and Lee has been in turmoil.
Okay.
At one point during one of the disasters, Gary Tuthill was heading the county. I mean,
Right.
that is true. To what extent, I do not know.
And the other argument is that they're so close to their hospitals that they never get an order and they just take patients to the hospitals.
Well, I'd like to see the proof of that.
Well, exactly.
I think that we have an executive session to do, right?
Yes. Yes.
All right, so I got to cut you off. You know, Dr. Markowitz, I think, said it, you know, convincingly before that vote happened, which is, you know, so we're going to hold ALS agencies hostage to narcotics when they are carrying epinephrine and Yoderon and potentially life-saving drugs. And you know, maybe some of those drugs for BLS, but it seemed, and it was suggested in a vacuum of data. You know, so you can talk about structure, and this is structural, right? You're going to put drugs on every ambulance. Well, great. Well, what's your objection? Well, we don't want pain out there. Well, you know, good. So what's the real argument? It's seizures. So how many people don't get benzos in a timely fashion? You know, so there are systems in place. Schoharie in our region, you know, has a fly car system. There are ALS intercept protocols in place for, you know, those agencies, those agents to be brought to those patients. What's the performance of those systems? Do you really need every agency to carry midazolam to effectively stop seizures in a timely fashion within a given county? Or can you lay a fly car system that has benzos on board on the system and perform better than you might if you just put it on every ambulance? So we don't have any data to answer that question, but that's the only way I could begin to think that we needed to do this.
Right. Let me just take one more minute, because, and I want to have this discussion. I'm going to have it this afternoon. I talked to Phil about it yesterday, and I'll ask the chairman if that's okay. But in our region, the data suggests that 63% of services in our region do not carry controlled substances. However, the interesting point is that in Mountain Lakes, it's only 6%. So the thought that runs through my mind is, those guys up there can do it. Why can't we do it? So, however, North Country, which is sort of in the same area, has 80%, 80.6% of their services do not carry. So there are vast discrepancies. Hudson Valley, Remo, essentially has 100% of their services, as does New York City.
So we're still talking structure.
Yeah.
We're not talking outcome. So what's, 911 call, seizure, man down, seizing. What's the response time of that system? So until you know that, you can't critique, this one structure being better than another. So you might have tons of drugs and lousy response times. You might have no drugs and great response times because you have another way to get it there.
So I think the virtue of actually having this motion to look at these impacts is very important, because it brings up issues like Dr. Leinhardt just brought up. And we all need, and that's why I'm appealing to all of you, I need feedback from you about what the impact would be and whether or not we could move in that direction, whether that's really indicated.
I would do a statewide seizure response time delivery of benzo study by region, and then look at who the great performers are. I bet you the state, even where they have plenty of drugs, doesn't perform that great.
And that's a discussion I think that really needs to occur at CMAC. But from looking at this data, and I really want to share these numbers with you just briefly, it's clear to me that if we're going to move in that direction, then we need to get the REMACs and the regional councils on board about it in coordination with the CMAC and do what we can to move this forward. But it's pretty clear that there are wide discrepancies around the state.
But we don't know how they perform in actual outcome.
Right. Exactly.
So that's
what some of us are saying.
Yeah.
We do it on a two-tiered basis. Some people on the CMAC are saying, well, that's really not good because it introduces some delay. We don't know what the delay is.
Right. Well, you can't infer that, though. I mean, without knowing the numbers. I would assume that the state, especially with most PCRs being electronic now, I think more than half the state PCRs are now electronic. It shouldn't be that hard for them to pull data on seizure patients.
Yeah, that's a very good point.
Time of 911, time of on scene, time of drug administration, if they're still seizing. Right?
The other interesting thing was, just one more thing, Suffolk County was one of the other big numbers at 63.4%, but I talked to Bob DeLoggy. He was on we had a call Friday, and I put together a 4-page report about it. He said what they're doing down there in their region is they are walking their applicants through the process. They're providing them with lists of vendors. They're providing them with templates of plans. They're providing a great deal of assistance so that number is actually around 30% now, and there's approximately 30-some% that are in process. So I just thought that was an interesting response by one region. That might be a model for the rest of us.
Again, I mean, we spend at the CMAC historically forever talking about structure. Protocols is about structure.
Mm-hmm.
Right? There's very little delivered to us to deliberate protocol revisions based on outcomes. Well, how quickly are we performing? It'd be nice to know before you go blindly developing a new structure, just because somebody thinks it's a good idea. I mean, one of the things that got floated was pain, that we need to do this for pain. It's like,
well, I think the CMAC was sort of predicating the motion on that this was, in their minds, a best practice issue. So I can understand that from that point of view. But I think you're right. Are there numbers to back it up?
The difficulty, I think, with the numbers is, was it a reason for dispatch a seizure, or is the chief complaining a seizure? And if the patient had a seizure before you got there, they still seize them, because the protocol's not very clear on whether you administer the benzos if they're already done seizing,
Right.
or you just start the line, have the benzos available if they seize again. You know, there's nothing clear on that. Your
I think
patient
that's
had
the
one
problem. Our
seizure.
problem with a two-tier system is we get canceled by an agency that would simultaneously dispatch patients not seizing anymore. They start en route to the hospital, and guess what? The patient starts seizing, and now you're
You're behind the
canceled,
8 ball.
way behind. And then they're calling you for another link-up that is delaying.
Personally, I would hate to see, I have a lot of trouble with backing down a service from ALS to BLS just because they're not carrying controlled substances, because there are a lot of other things that can be done. So, and I know that works. Well, you have to ask Gus.
I think if we were in a, outcomes mode, we would say, how's your region going to hit this benchmark?
Yeah.
For response to seizures. You could even throw pain medication delivery, timeliness of pain medication, and just say we don't, as a system, there's many ways to accomplish that, and there are many different kinds of systems across the state. So we don't really know which performs better.
Right, but the other question is it worthwhile reaching out, and this is what we're trying to do on the tag, reaching out to these services that currently don't provide to say, why don't you, what are the barriers to doing that? Would you consider doing it if you had some assistance, et cetera? So we might actually get some more doing that, and then we'd have to figure out what we do with the ones that.
Well, your starting
can't.
point. Your starting point is to comply with the CMAC motion. That's your starting point.
Right, which I think is going to happen. So that's why I'm trying to do the best we can in terms of figuring out whether or not that we can get some of these services to move in that direction.
It's you're going for structure.
Is there any specifics as to how many narcotics have to be at an agency to constitute a narcotic agency?
The motion itself reads, required that by August 1st, 2014, all New York State EMS agencies that operate at the CC level or above carry and administer controlled substances in accordance with approved protocols.
So you could have a protocol that says we just treat seizure patients and carry Valium, and
So that would be
we're
the
done.
regional protocol to do that, but it's saying that you will have them and use them according to protocol.
Yeah, if that's set up by the region, and ours is clearly specified.
Anyway, Mr. Chairman, I would like to have a discussion about that this afternoon. That's
Yeah,
agreeable
I
to
think
you.
it's a good idea. I have to agree with Dr. Weinhardt too. Until they get a little bit more input on this, and until they do a further study, I think they're kind of jumping the gun, especially with the change in the New York State adapting the national standards. You're going to have intermediates that are going to be giving more medications out there. Although those intermediates are not going to be classed as ALS. I think that, personally, I think the state's kind of jumped the gun already on a couple of things, but I would think that you would need that information. You need some more research on it to prove what you need.
All right, Bill, we have an
All right, thank
executive
you.
session, right?
Yeah, we have a brief executive session. I'll ask the REMAC members, if I may, to convene in the saloon area. The rest may remain. I'm trying to say that. Tavern area. Tavern, right.
Time for a jury. I gotta get myself on this count.
Yeah, right on, important decisions are made in tavern.
Do a shot for me, so.
I think that's how the American Revolution got going, too.